welcome back to my channel. So I'm going to be reading the next chapter of The School for Good and Evil, chapter 13, and it's called The Doom Room. And this is the picture. Okay, let's get started. Agatha had no idea why lunch was a joint school activity, because Evers sat with Evers, Nevers sat with Nevers, and both groups pretended that the other wasn't there. Lunch took place in the clearing, an intimate picnic field outside the Blue Forest gates. To get to the clearing, students had to journey through twisty tunnels of trees that grew narrower and narrower, until one by one the children spat through a hollow trunk onto emerald grass. As soon as Agatha came through the good tunnel, she followed the line of Evers, receiving picnic blankets from nymphs in red hoods, while Nevers from the evil tunnel took rusty pails from red-suited wolves. Agatha found a shady patch of grass and reached into her willow basket to find a lunch of smoked trout sandwiches, rampion salad, strawberry souffle, and a vial of sparkling lemon water. She let thoughts of riddles and dead ends fall away as she opened her watering mouth to the sandwich. Sophie swiped it. "You don't know what I've been through," she sobbed, scarfing it whole. "Here's yours." She plunked down a pail of gruel. Agatha stared at her. "Look, I asked," Sophie garbled between bites. "Apparently nevers need to learn deprivation. Part of your training. This is lovely, by the way." Agatha was still staring. "What?" Sophie said. "Do I have blood on my teeth?" Because I thought I got it over Agatha's shoulder, she saw Tedros and his friends, pointing and snickering. "Oh no," Sophie groaned. "What did you do now?" Agatha kept gaping at her. "If you're going to be a brat about it, you can have the souffle." Sophie frowned. "Why is that strange imp waving at me?" Agatha turned and saw Kiko across the clearing, waving and flaunting newly red hair. It was the exact same color as Tristan's. Agatha's face went white. You know her?" Sophie said, watching Kiko giddily approach Tristan. "We're friends," Agatha said, waving Kiko away from him. "You have a friend?" Sophie said. Agatha turned to her. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" Sophie yelled. "You haven't been eating candy, have you?" "Huh?" Sophie shrieked, realizing her hand flew up and ripped. Her hand flew up and ripped Lesso's wart off her face. "Why didn't you tell me?" she cried, as Tedros and boys exploded into whoops. "Oh, it can't get any worse," Sophie moaned. Hort picked up her discarded wart and ran away with it. Sophie looked at Agatha. Agatha cracked a smile. "It's not funny," Sophie wailed, but Agatha was laughing and so was Sophie. What do you think he'll do with it?" Agatha snickered. Sophie stopped laughing. "We need to get home, now." Agatha told Sophie about all her frustrations solving the riddle, including her dead end with Professor Sater. Before she could even try to ask about his painting, Sater had taken off to meet his evil students, leaving 3 geriatric pigs to lecture about the importance of fortifying one's house. "He's the only one who can help us," said Agatha. "Better hurry, my days are numbered," Sophie said glumly, and recounted everything that had happened in her room with her roommates, including their predictions of Sophie's doom. "You die? That doesn't make any sense. You can't be the villain in our story if we're friends." "That's why the schoolmaster said we can't be friends," Sophie replied. "Something has to come between us. Something that answers the riddle." "What could possibly come between us?" Agatha said, still at loss. "Maybe it's all connected. This thing that good has and evil doesn't. Do you think it's why good always wins? Evil used to win, according to Lady Lesso, but now good has something that beats them all. But the schoolmaster forbade us to return to his towers, so the answer to the riddle isn't a word or a thing or an idea. We have to do something. Now we're getting somewhere. First, it's something that can't turn us against each other. Secondly, it's something that beats evil every time. That can, and third, it's something we can physically do. The girls spun to each other. I got it, said Agatha. Me too, said Sophie. It's so obvious. So obvious. It's no idea, Agatha said. Me either, sighed Sophie. Across the field, Everboy slowly trespassed into Evergirl territory. Girls waited like flowers to be picked, only to see Beatrix attract the lion's share. As Beatrix flirted with her suitors, Tedros fidgeted on a tree stump. Finally, he stood up, shoved in front of the other boys, and asked Beatrix to take a walk. "You were supposed to rescue me," Sophie whimpered, watching them go. "Sophie, we have the chance to save our village from a 200-year-old curse, to rescue children from beatings and failings to escape wolves, waves, gargoyles, and everything else in this awful school, and to end a story that will kill you. And you're thinking about a boy?" "I wanted my happy ending, Aggie," Sophie said, tears sparkling. "Getting home alive is our happy ending, Sophie." Sophie nodded, but her eyes never left Tedros. "Welcome to Good Deeds," said Professor Dovey to students gathered in the Purity Common Room. "Now we're behind our other subjects, so we'll dispense with the usual pleasantries. Let me begin by saying that over the years I've seen a disturbing decrease in esteem for this class." "Because it's after lunch," Tedros whispered into Agatha's ear. "And you're talking to me why? Seriously, what witchy spell did you put on me to make me choose your goblin?" Agatha didn't turn. "You did something," Tedros fumed. "Tell me." "Can't divulge a witch's secrets," Agatha said, gazing ahead. "Knew it." Tedros saw Professor Dovey glaring and flashed her a cocksure smile. She rolled her eyes and went on. He leaned over again to Agatha. "Tell me, and my boys will leave you alone." "Does that include you?" "Just tell me what you did." Agatha exhaled. "I used the Hopscottle spell, a potent hex from the Galvadonic witches of Reapercott. They're a small coven on the shores of Callus River. Not just expert spellcasters, but also great harvesters of what you did." "Well," said Agatha, turning to him, "the Hopscottle spell worms its way into your brains like a swarm of leeches. It swims its way into every cranny, breeding, multiplying, festering for just the right moment. And just when it hooks into your every nook and crevice, it sucks you of every intelligent thought and leaves you dumb as a donkey's ass." Tedros went red. "One more thing. It's permanent," Agatha said, and turned back around. While Tedros mumbled about hanging, stooning, and the other ways his father punished wicked women, Agatha listened to Professor Dovey justify the importance of good deeds. "Every time you do a good deed with true intention, your soul grows purer. Though lately, my good students have been doing them as if they were chores, preferring to cultivate their egos, arrogance, and waist size. Let me assure you, our winning streak can end at any time. Not if the schoolmaster controls the story," said Agatha. "Agatha, the schoolmaster has absolutely no role in how the stories play out," Professor Dovey said impatiently. "He cannot control the story." "He seemed pretty good at magic to me," Agatha replied. "Excuse me?" "He can split into shadows. He can make a room disappear. He can make it all seem like a dream. So surely he can control a pen." "And how might you know all this?" Professor Dovey sighed. Agatha saw Tedros smirking. "Because he showed me," she said. Tedros' smirk vanished. Professor Dovey looked like a kettle about to steam. Students glanced nervously between her and Agatha. The teacher smiled tightly. Oh, Agatha, what an imagination you have. It will serve you well when you're waiting for someone to rescue you from a ravenous dragon. Let's hope he arrives in time. Now, three keys to good deeds are creativity, feasibility, and spontaneity. And spontaneity. Spontaneity? I'm not sure. Okay. Agatha opened her mouth, but Professor Dovey silenced her with a glare. Knowing she was on shaky ground, Agatha pulled out parchment and took notes with the rest. Before surviving fairy tales, the students of both schools found themselves summoned to an assembly in the clearing. As soon as Agatha popped through the tree tunnel, Kiko grabbed her. Tristan changed his hair. Agatha glanced over at Tristan, leaning against a tree. His hair was blonde now, drooping over one eye. He reminded her of someone. He said he did it for Beatrix, Kiko wailed, hair still hideously red. Agatha followed Tristan's eyes to Beatrix, who was jabbering to Tedros. Tedros couldn't have been less enthused and puffed at the blonde bangs drooping over his. Agatha coughed. She looked back at Tristan, puffing at his droopy blonde bangs, then at Tedros, who had two shirt buttons undone and his tie loosened with its golden tea, then at Tristan, who had undone two buttons and loosened his tie with its golden tea. What if I'm blonde like Beatrix? Kiko hounded. Then Tristan will like me? Agatha turned. You need to find a new crush immediately. Attention! She looked up to find the entire faculty fanned between the two tunnels, including Castor and Pollux, whose heads had been reunited on their canine body. Professor Dovey stepped forward. There's been some. Move your hides, you lazy cows, Castor barked. The last Nevers hurried from the tunnel, with Sophie stumbling out last. She gave Agatha a confused look across the clearing. Agatha shrugged back. Professor Dovey opened her mouth to resume. Presenting Clarissa Dovey, Dean of the School for Good and Professor Emeritus of Good Deeds, said Castor. Thank you, Castor, said Professor Dovey. Any interruptions or misbehavior will be swiftly punished. Thank you, Castor, Professor Dovey shrieked. Castor stared at his feet. Professor Dovey cleared her throat. Students, we have called you here because there have been some unfortunate rumors, lies as I call them, explained Lesso. Agatha recognized her as the teacher who had ripped down Sator's painting in the Gallery of Good. So let us be clear, Professor Dovey continued. First, there is no curse on evil. Evil still has power to defeat good, provided evil does their homework, Professor Manley growled. Nevers muttered, as if they didn't believe this for a second. Second, the schoolmaster is on no one's side, said Professor Dovey. How do you know? Raven shouted. Why should we believe you? Hester yelled, as Nevers' cat called. Because we have proof. Professor Sater stepped forward. Nevers went quiet. Agatha's eyes widened. Proof? What proof? Then she noticed Lady Lesso's looked especially sour, confirming this proof did in fact exist. Was the proof the answer to the riddle? Last but not least, said Professor Dovey, the schoolmaster's primary responsibility is to protect the historian. For that reason, he remains in this well-fortressed tower. Thus, regardless of the tales you may hear, let me assure you, no student has ever seen the schoolmaster, and no student ever will. Eyes fell on Agatha. Ah, is this the storyteller? Lady Lesso leered. It's not a story, Agatha shot back. She saw Sophie shake her head to say this was an ill-advised battle. Lady Lesso smiled. I'll give you one more chance to redeem yourself. Did you meet the schoolmaster? Agatha looked at the evil teacher, purple eyes bulging like marbles, then at Professor Sater, smiling at her curiously, then at Sophie across the clearing, miming miming white gluing, mouth zipping. Yes, you lie to a teacher? Lady Lesso lashed. It's not a lie, a voice shouted. Everyone turned to Sophie. We were both there. We were in his tower, and I bet you saw the story in too, Beatrix sneered. Matter of fact, we did, Sophie retorted to laughter. And did it start your fairy tale too? It did start our fairy tale. All hail the Queen of Fools, Beatrix proclaimed to roars. Then you must be the Grand Empress. Beatrix turned to Agatha, arms akimbo. Ah, the mistake, Beatrix groaned. Good has never been so wrong. You wouldn't know good if it crawled up your dress, Agatha yelled. Beatrix gasped so loud Tedros cracked a grin. Don't talk to Beatrix that way, a voice said. Agatha turned to find a blonde-haired Tristan. Beatrix? Agatha exploded. You sure you don't want Tedros? He'd love to marry himself. Tedros stopped smiling. Dumbstruck, he glanced between Agatha, Tristan, and Beatrix. He lost patience and punched Tristan in the mouth. Tristan drew his dull training sword. Tedros whipped out his, and they clashed in public duel. But Tristan had been studying Tedros in swordplay, so they both used the exact same riposts and the same retreats, even the same fight calls, until no one knew who was who. Rather than intervene, swordplay Professor Espada twirled his long mustache. We'll dissect this thoroughly in class tomorrow. Nevers had a more immediate response. Fight! Raven roared. Nevers rushed Evers, steamrolled stunned wolves, and dive-bombed into the dueling swordsmen. Whooping Everboys charged in, inciting an epic playground brawl and that splattered Evergirls with mud. Agatha couldn't help but laugh at girls brought to their knees by dirt, until filthy Beatrix pointed at her. She started it. Screaming Evergirls charged after Agatha, who climbed a tree. Nearby, Tedros managed to reach his head from under boys and saw Sophie spring past. Help! He yelled. Help! He yelled. Sophie stepped on his head as she ran to help Agatha, who was being pelted with pebbles by Beatrix. Then she got Hort out of the corner of her eye. You, give me back my wart. Hort scooted around the brawling mass, Sophie in pursuit, until she got close enough to pick up a fallen branch and hurl it at his head. Hort ducked, and it hit Lady Lesso in the face. Students froze. Lady Lesso touched her cold, gashed cheek. Staring at the blood on her hand, she grew eerily calm. Her long red nail rose and pointed at Agatha. Lock her in her tower. A swarm of fairies seized Agatha and dragged her past smirking Tedros towards the Evers tunnel. No, it's my fault, Sophie cried. And this one. Lady Lesso stabbed her blood-stained finger at Sophie. To the doom room. Before Sophie could scream, a claw covered her mouth and pulled her past petrified classmates into the darkness of trees. Sophie couldn't live through torture. Sophie couldn't even survive true evil. As fairies flew her upstairs, Agatha welled panicked tears and glanced down to see teachers surging into the foyer. Professor Sater, she cried, clinging to a banister. You have to believe us. The historian thinks Sophie's a villain. It's going to kill her. Sater and 20 teachers looked up, alarmed. How do you see our village? Agatha yelled as fairies wrested her away. How do we get home? What does a princess have that a villain doesn't? Sater smiled. Questions. Always in threes. Teachers chuckled and dispersed. Seeing the historian? Espada mused. She's the one who eats candy, Professor Anemone explained. No, you have to save her, Agatha begged, but the fairies dragged her to her room and locked her in. Frantic, she scaled her bed canopy past paintings of lip-locked heroes and lunged for the broken ceiling tile, but it wasn't broken anymore. Someone had sealed it tight. Blood drained from Agatha's cheeks. Seder was her only hope, and he refused to answer questions. Now her only friend would die in that dungeon, all because a magic pen had mistaken a princess for a witch. Then something flashed in her head, something Seder said in class. If you do have questions. Breathless, Agatha emptied her basket of school books. A gray wolf, stoic and efficient, tugged Sophie by a long chain fixed to a tight iron collar around her neck. Skirting the dank sewer wall, she couldn't fight her leash. One wrong step and she'd slip off the narrow path into roaring sludge. Across the rotted black river, she saw two wolves dragged moaning vexed from the direction in which she was headed. His eyes met hers, red-rimmed, hateful. Whatever happened to him in the doom room had left him more a villain than when he entered. Agatha, Sophie told herself. Agatha will get us home. She bit back tears. Stay alive for Agatha. As she approached the sewer's halfway point, where sludge turned to clear lake water, she felt the wall's solid stone become rusty grating. The wolf kicked the door open and shoved her in. Sophie lifted her head to a dark dungeon, lit by a single torch. Everywhere she looked were tools of punishment. Breaking wheel, rack, stocks, nooses, hooks, girls, iron maiden, thumbscrews, and a terrifying collection of spears, clubs, rods, whips, and knives. Her heart stopped. She turned away. Two red eyes glowed from the corner. Slowly a big black wolf rose from shadows, twice the size of all the other wolves, but this one had a human's body with a thick, hairy chest, sinewy arms, bulging calves, and massive feet. The beast cracked open a scroll of parchment and read in a deep growl, "You, Sophie of Woods Beyond, have hereby been summoned to the doom room for the following sins: conspiracy to commit untruth, disruption of assembly, attempted murder of a faculty member." Murder? Sophie gasped. Incitement of public riots, crossing of boundary lines during assembly, destruction of school property, harassment of fellow students, and crimes against humanity. I plead not guilty to all charges, Sophie scowled, especially the last. The beast seized her face in his claws. Guilty until proven innocent. Let's go. Let's go, Sophie screamed. He sniffed her neck. Aren't you a luscious peach? You'll leave marks. To her surprise, the beast released her. It usually takes beating to find the weak point. Sophie looked at the beast, confused. He licked his lips and grinned. With a cry, she lunged for the door. He slammed her to the wall and cuffed her arms to hooks above her heads. Let me go. The beast slunk along the wall, hunting for just the right punishment. Please, whatever I did, I'm sorry, Sophie wailed. Villains don't learn from apologies, the beast said. He considered a cudgel for a moment, then moved on. Villains learn from pain. Please, someone help. Pain makes you stronger, said the beast. He caressed the tip of a rusty spear, then hung it back up. Help, Sophie shrieked. Pain makes you grow. The beast picked up an axe. Sophie's face went ghost white. He walked up to her, axe handle in his meaty claw. Pain makes you evil. He took her hair in his hands. No, Sophie choked. The beast raised the axe. Please. The blade slashed through her hair. Sophie stared at her long, beautiful gold locks on the black dungeon floor. Mouth frozen open in silence, slowly she raised her terrorized face to meet the big black beast's. Then her lips quivered, her body hung from its chains, and the tears came. She buried her shorn, shagged head in her chest and cried. She cried until her nose stuffed up and she couldn't breathe. Spit kicking her black tunic, wrist bleeding against her cuffs, a lock snapped. Sophie lifted her raw red eyes to see The beast unhooked her from the wall. "Get out," he growled, and hung the axe up. When he turned, Sophie was gone. The beast lumbered out of the cell and knelt at the midpoint between boiling muck and clearing water. As he dipped, the bloody chains and currents smashed from both directions, rinsing them clean. Scrubbing the last spots of blood away, he caught his reflection in the sludge. Only it wasn't his. The beast spun. Sophie shoved him in. The beast thrashed in the water and slime, grunting and flailing for the wall. The tides were too strong. She watched him gurgle his last breaths and sink like a stone. Sophie smoothed her hair and walked toward the light, swallowing the sickness in her throat. The good forgive, said the rules, but the rules were wrong. They had to be, because she hadn't forgiven. She hadn't forgiven at all. Right, and that was chapter 13, the Doom Room, and the next chapter is chapter 14, the Crypt Keeper's Solution. And that is a picture. Okay, so thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next video. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and comment down below what you liked most about this chapter of the book. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.